Last, we have a point of view on disability, not everyone's concern, by Dr. Ashwin Mahesh, Advisory Board, Fourth Way Foundation. Dr. Ashwin Mahesh is a member of the Advisory Board of Fourth Way Foundation. He founds and leads LVBL Accelerator, a neighborhood improvement company focused on quickening the pace of adoption of sustainable products and services. Previously, he founded the electric vehicle-based transportation service Lithium, the social technology lab, Mapunity, and the development magazine India Together. He teaches a graduate course based on these themes at Kautilya School of Public Policy. He also advised several initiatives of state and national governments in urban development. He was awarded the Ashoka Fellowship for Social Entrepreneurship in 2009. I invite you, Dr. Mahesh.
Okay, good evening to all of you. I know it's been a long day. You've listened to a lot of powerful messages, things that are important for more and more people to hear. I will try and do this in a simple way, partly as a way of wrapping together some of the things that have been said during the day, but also to suggest something by way of answering some of the questions that have come up. What did we start with? Lots of people pointing out that disability and inclusion are complex problems. Right? There are all sorts of things that need to be sorted. There are also granular problems. What do we mean by that? Individual families, individual disabled people encounter them in their own way. You are born into the family that you are born into the geography that you are born into, you are born into the income level that you are born into, and that is your experience of disability. That is your family's experience of disability. The common answers that we are trying to provide that would be applicable to schools, to teachers, to training institutions, these are averages at best. These are not the particular situation of individuals who experience disability or their families. And it's complex, granular, and you have to do a lot of things. Right? A very large number of things need to be done. Protection, preemption, redress. So to do all these things, we need to develop the human resources. And this is another thing that we talked about. We need the people who can do all these things. We need to invest in the people who can do all these things. There has to be adequate allocation of resources. There has to be institutional capacity and all of those things to make this expertise and capacity come up in sufficient numbers in all places, right? We need to keep, and then we also need to keep validating what we do. Like Meenu was saying, we knew some things 25 years ago. We know more things now, right? And some of that is the result of research. Some of that is the result of experiential learning for some people. Some of that is just dumb luck. All sorts of things have added up to our learning. But there's an even bigger challenge. There is a very large number of people who need to deal with all of this, and they have no skill at all. These are brothers and fathers and mothers and the people who actually experience the disability of their loved ones on a daily basis, and the disabled persons themselves. They have no skill. They have none of this theory of change. They have none of this, institutional capacity. They've not heard of all of these kinds of things. Their problem is very simple. They can't come down the stairs. They can't go to the toilet. They can't get into their damn school. This is their problem, right? And we have to work on the problem at that level. That is the actual problem. Everything else that we do is a kind of a half step towards addressing it. But we got to be clear that it's a half step. The people who have to deal with the disability on a daily basis, including the disabled themselves, they have no skill at all. And that's the other thing. They've never thought about it. And let's go to the next slide. And there's a reason for this. I already said this. Each person's disability is in a particular context, right? It's like this old Tolstoy thing. All happy families are the same. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. So it's the same thing, every disabled family. And it's not a disabled person, it's a disabled family when it happens. Every disabled family is disabled in its own way. And every disabled, the experience of that is different. Next. Now, why is it different in its own way? Because people don't think about disability until they or someone they love becomes disabled. And this question of aging has come about. Aging is actually not disability. Let's be clear on that. Aging is not disability. Aging makes you disabled. But when people use the word disability, why do they not equate aging with disability? It's simple. Disability is associated with things that a normal person, would otherwise be expected to be able to do. When you are 79 years old, there's not a big list of things you would be able to expect to be able to do. Therefore, aging is not thought of as disability. It is aging. It makes you disabled. And this is why aging is not thought of as disability. So therefore, we should not use the logic that 99% of us will become disabled one day or the other, and therefore we should deal with it. 99% of us will become dead one day. You can think of death as the ultimate disability. Right? So in a sense, we have to separate these things in context. People think of disability as a conversation or a condition pertaining to something that someone otherwise ought to be able to do under normal circumstances. And therefore, they don't think of it until they or someone they love becomes disabled. I'm sure when I became disabled, for my parents it would have been a shock. Right? I wasn't born disabled. I became disabled later. Which is even sort of in some sense something that you're even less prepared for, in a sense. So these are, in a sense, this is the reality. People are caught up in their lives. They have their particular circumstances. They have none of the learning or the body of knowledge needed to respond to it. They don't have the institutional support. Now the question is, what the hell are they supposed to do in a situation like this? Next. The state has numerous demands on its resources and attention. Right? I mean, in the sense, first of all, they don't have too much money. Partly because we don't give them much money, but they don't have too much money. The second is they have very low capacity, right? All the people that came to talk to you in the morning from the Sarkar, not one of them has worked even 10 days in the necessary fields to be able to address this problem. The minister himself told you, he's educating himself about disability. He may mean well, right? Most of the senior leadership in the department has previously been agriculture secretary and before that fisheries secretary and so on and so forth. They've got no history in any of this stuff. They're not going to solve this problem. They're not even able to fix a pothole. How the hell are they going to solve this problem? Right? This is not something, you have to sort of look at the data on this. Companies got to have another kind of problem. They're focused on profits, which some people think that's their core thing. They should be focused on profits. There's an interesting theory of humanity that they should form institutions that think about money. You can talk about that, but occasionally they think of charity too now, especially because they've been told by the law that they have to think about charity. It's a very interesting paradox that you have to be charitable, right? I mean, that's a very complex way of stating charity itself. But these are not enough. The state is not going to do much. State is not going to do much. In 75 years, they managed to make India put India in the bottom third of all countries on most development indicators. How the heck are they going to do that? Anything. They're not going to do enough. The market is not going to do it. So what next? Next. The solution has to be found in society. This is the reality. The solution has to be found in society. Now, how? We'll come to that. And I'm not even saying I know even half of the answer to how. But I'm pretty clear that the solution has to be found in society, number one. The second thing is society means not civil society, society. Too many people who accept that the solution has to be found in society are also still looking for it in civil society. Civil society is not society. Civil society has a role to play, but it is not society. Why does the solution have to be found in society? Because the scale of the problem is very large. The scale of the problem is very, very, very large. It's very granular. It's in every panchayat, like Bala was saying. It's in every panchayat. It's in every street, actually. It's not even in every panchayat. To find enough people to respond to something that is so big, you have to look in a group that is large enough to find that many people. The only group that is large enough to find that many people is all of society. There is no subset group in which you can find enough people to respond to this thing at street by street. You can't. There's another reason to look for the answer in society. There are people who care. For every person who is disabled and their families around them, in that same street, and sometimes in that same house, in the next neighbor's house, and so on and so forth, there are people who care. There are people in a position to do something because they are right next to them. If somebody needs to be helped to come outside the house or go up a flight of stairs, state policy is not going to help them. You need somebody to hold their hand and help them go up the stairs. That person has to be next door. There is no other substitute for that, right? There's no civil society organization for taking you up the stairs. It has to be other people doing that. So, in a sense, we have to increase the number of problem-solving people in response to this problem, because the scale of the problem itself is such that it is not a technical or a managerial problem. It is a social problem, and unfortunately also a political problem. If enough people in this community said, don't vote for Congress party, they'll listen to you. But we'll sit around saying, oh, no, half of us should say don't vote for Congress party, half of us should say don't vote for BJP, half of us should don't vote for JDS. So what happens? There isn't a coherent advocacy of who in the political space supports the things that you care about. We don't even have interest groups that advocate for the specific outcomes. And people are worried. I've seen people come and say to us, if we start shouting at the minister or the secretary, they won't listen to us next time. That's actually not true. I mean, think about it. Every influential person in politics is a politician. And most people are trying to get the attention of political people by not trying to bother them. It doesn't make any sense. The only reason anybody would listen to you is if you are political. Otherwise, I can say, okay, you are not even going to bother, respond in a political way. I won't lose any votes because of you. If I was a politician and if I knew that you would tell people to vote against me, I'd listen to you. So we have to think, and there's another problem, right? Let's say you care about disability. The problem is that the people who care about disability, advocate about disability, they go and talk to the government about disability, they ask for things pertaining to the problem of disability. And they're always worried. They don't want to sort of create friction in that conversation because they worry that they won't be able to get the attention of the person later for something that they want to. There's a simple answer to it. Fight for something in which you have no vested interest. Let's say you want the minister to pay attention to disability, but you're not that much somehow invested in whatever, let's say native trees. You go and ask the environment minister, why the hell don't you have any more native trees? There's nothing he can do to you. You don't have any NGO in environmentalism. You don't have anything. You have to go and fight for the thing on which you have no vested interest. Today what has happened, all the people who are fighting for a particular cause somehow are invested in it. And the government also knows that. So they'll say, if I push back against this guy will get worried that he'll get excluded from the conversation. Therefore, he won't push me too hard. Right? It's important. If I know all the work that I've done over like 25 years of trying various things in government, I never formed an NGO. Why form an NGO? Start with citizenship. As a citizen, you can say anything. Even you can tell boldly. Right? Because you're coming from a space in which you are the owner of the process. And other people are going around saying they work for you. Avare heltare. Naan janasevakanu anta. Ee janasevakanu alva na kelsa kortini. Right? You have to sort of keep the paradigm in which you are supposed to engage with each stakeholder. And if you don't have that paradigm, it's not going to work. So the two things that I wanted to say. Okay. So all of them have a role to play. And this comes back to the question that was raised 1 or 2 sessions ago. State has a role to play, market has a role to play, civil society has a role to play. And the state has more than just a role to play. The state has obligations. It's supposed to do some things. Not because it chooses to. It's supposed to do some things. But all these actors have to meet disabled people and their families where they are. Where they are. So I would make one request. Don't work with the government. Don't work with the corporates. Don't work with civil society organizations. Work with disabled people and their families. And because you work with the disabled people and their families, invite all these other people to come join you in doing that. If you did this, a very different paradigm of how to intervene will emerge, in which everybody is held accountable by the fact that you are working on the problem directly. But as long as we say we are going to try to figure out how to influence the secretary or the minister to do something, we're going to figure out how to influence, IIM to study something and work on it. These are good things to do. I would do it. I would do it. But these have to be on top of a process of saying, and this is what, when Gayatri was asking this question about livability, I said this, you should have a very simple rule. Nobody who works for me can be poor. Right? It's a very simple thing. My rule has to be that nobody who works for me can be poor. Then there will be fewer people around you who are poor, because you are ensuring that they're not poor. In the same way, you said nobody who works for me can be excluded from anything because of disability. Then you have a society in which livability is the norm, inclusion is the norm. And so my suggestion to you is, think of the problem differently. Right? I have the experience of being a disabled person. I have the experience of going and yelling at government. I have the experience of working in government. I've taught in this university. So I feel all these spaces have something to offer. But I think we also have to say that the everyday lived experience of the disabled person and those around that person is where we have to solve the problem. And everything we do eventually has to say, it has to speak to those sets of people. If we do that, then there's a chance of addressing this problem.